People who were at celebrative events during 9/11. For example, weddings or birthdays. What was the impact of 9/11 on the course of the event? My cousin was actually born as everything was happening, I think around 8:50, so my aunt and uncle are super happy just getting to meet their new bundle of joy when they learned the news. It definitely put a damper on the excitement. My dad was flying that day in a Learjet transporting cargo. He was told to land ASAP at any airport possible. My mom had to drive 3 hours to pick him at this random airport. On the way home they picked up a stray puppy on the side of the road. They named him Rudy after the current mayor of New York. He passed a few weeks ago. Sorry about Rudy. My birthday is 9/11. 9/11/1991. I was in 4th grade when it happened. My teacher was a lovely middle-aged lady and she was crying through the day, which I felt was a little odd. On top of that, a bunch of kids kept getting checked out of class. I secretly hoped that I would too, but it never happened. Found out about it when I got home and it was all over the news. Shocked was an understatement. I had a friend whose birthday is also 9/11. Every year since 6th grade something bad would happen. We joked about it the day before on 9/10. We were seniors in high school at the time, because the previous year nothing had happened to him. Fool straight up said he's going to cause a war since the bad karma skipped a year. He did not have a good week. The day of was not the celebration, but the day after, on the 11th. My mom was pregnant with my youngest brother, and her brother, my uncle, was supposed to be in the tower for a meeting. All the phone lines were down and we could not find out where he was. Understandably worried, my mother ends up going into labor. On the 12th, we find out that my uncle was late to work, very out of character, and was safe. It turns out he had to stay home for a plumber, and when he tried to get to work, he couldn't get on the subway or find a taxi. Very focused, he just started walking towards the towers. Frustrated that he was late, someone actually stopped him on the street to tell him you can't go that way and explain what happened. His outlook on the day quickly changed. Later on the 12th, my baby brother was born, and it was my grandmother's 60th birthday as well. My grandmother would say that between finding her son was safe and her grandson being born, it was the best birthday ever. My birthday is 9/9, which was on a Sunday that year. For that birthday my family and I had went to a theme park, so I missed school on Monday. So, on that Tuesday when I was back at school, I had brought cupcakes for everyone. It wasn't exactly a huge celebration or anything, but it was a festive mood. I remember my art teacher was kind of jokingly suggesting everyone sing me happy birthday, and they did. And then a principal walked in, and then they left the room for a minute. Then they rolled a TV in. I was in 6th grade, so I didn't understand the full depth of it, how horrific it was. At the time I was just annoyed my birthday was kind of spoiled. I was on a field trip, science related, so we were outdoors in some random marsh areas, or what I assumed to be marsh. IDK, I was in 5th grade. I lived in West Hartford, CT at the time, and we were like a quarter of the way through the field trip when our guide got a buzz from her walkie-talkie. She just kept saying over and over again, "You're not serious, you're kidding, oh my god, oh my god." She suddenly turns around with this frantic look on her face and tells us we have to get back on the bus now. We get on the bus, and everyone is confused. Some teachers were crying, still had no idea why. The bus driver was Hispanic and he was saying all this stuff in Spanish, messing with a rosary. We get back to school, they stuff the whole 5th grade class, made up of like 5 different homerooms, into a room and put on the Goonies. We see teachers running around, kids and parents in the hallways. It wasn't until later that the principal comes in and tells us exactly what happened, and how we should tell the younger kids, and it's our responsibility to be strong for them. IDK. Parents eventually came to pick us up. My mom frantic and glued to the TV the rest of the night, trying to contact my dad, who was traveling at the time, either in Boston or in NY. Either way, they had shut down all major ways of transportation. He ended up having to take a ferry and begged to rent a car to get back. That day was just weird. Not a celebration, but I was giving a tour of my university to potential students and their parents. We'd just gotten underway shortly before, so by this point I have them part way across campus, and this is our science building. It's nice, we have trees and other natural things here in the courtyard, and Why are there all those TVs and what are those people watching? Then when we walked up to one and saw the second plane hit, that was the end of whatever tour I was giving. It wasn't even conscious, I just didn't talk to any of them anymore, thinking just about what I was looking at, and then I wandered away to go home forgetting they were there. Not me, but my friend and her family were on vacation in Disney World. They were minding their own business, having a great day, until all of a sudden everyone was exiting the park in a rush. They asked a cast member what was happening and he told them the news. Since no one knew the scope of what was happening, the parks were being evacuated in case they were the next target. We live pretty close to New York, so they spent the rest of the day panicked, calling everyone they've ever known in their hotel room to make sure everyone was okay. I was 10 on 9/11, and I've never forgotten the news footage of an empty Disney World from that day. My grandfather's birthday is the 11th of September, 1940. I remember my mom waking me up early to watch the news that morning, as she knew it was going to be a nice learning experience about the world. I remember trying to grasp my tiny 11-year-old mind around the fact that crap was going to get really real soon, when my doorbell rang. My grandpa stood at the door holding his own birthday cake with a goofy smile on his face. He had no idea yet. It was an hour drive to our house. I didn't know what to do, so I just cried and gave him a hug. It sucked that his birthday was momentarily ruined by that event, but he played it off like a champ. Your grandpa sounds like a very sweet person. Happy his birthday isn't marred by such a tragedy nowadays. I was prepping for a high school cross-country event in Missouri. I was very focused on the event, and we had heard something happened in New York, but we kinda blew it off, like it wasn't that big of a deal. Our parents started showing up for the morning races, and runners were leaving and the coaches kept delaying the start of the races. There was a lot of talk amongst the runners and coaches, but us kids kept minimizing what was going on. There weren't any TVs at the course, and this was before kids had phones, so we really didn't know. Finally, my mom showed up and ran up to the coach, clearly very upset. She was scared and I had no idea why. I was whisked away from the meet, and in the car my mom told me what was happening and cursing the coaches for not sending us home. I was P. I had trained for this meet and was trying to break my personal best so I could be varsity. When I finally saw what was happening on TV, I finally understood and accepted how big of a deal this was. My mother's birthday was on 9/11. Apparently I interrupted her celebratory breakfast with my dad when I called to tell them what was happening in NYC. I was at college in Westchester County, about 20 miles from Manhattan. She chose to celebrate her birthday on the 12th for the rest of her life. Exact opposite here. I was due to be born on the first anniversary of 9/11. Since it was so recent and my parents didn't want me to deal with my birthday being a tragedy and there was like a verge an important chance of something going wrong, they decided to just do a C-section the day before. I was in elementary school at the time and my aunt had just had my cousin. I was so excited I got to leave school early and have fast food for lunch. We went to the hospital to wait to see the baby and all of the adults were in the waiting area crying and hovering over the TV. My dad kinda explained what was happening quietly and said that I shouldn't be scared, but when I see the new baby please be excited for my aunt. I've heard the story from my parents, and it's not as big as some of the others here, but I'll tell it. My dad had just gotten home from work. It was nighttime because we are in Australia. Mum was caring for me and about to put me to bed and dad had gotten tea, was eating it and had been told he was getting a raise. Here he was, sat in front of the TV, watching a soap opera while waiting for mum to be free so he could tell her the big news about his raise. It cut to the news reports of the aftermath of a plane flying through one of the Trade Center buildings. My dad called my mum, and they both watched as a second one crashed through the other tower. Both were in shock for the rest of the night and unsure of what was going to happen. TLDR. Dad got a raise, was going to tell mum but 9/11 happened and delayed it. Had a friend who was at a wedding in Hawaii, getting ready to come home. Most people say to him, oh that must have been nice, a few extra days in Hawaii, to which he answered that it absolutely sucked. They were stuck on the tarmac and in and out of the airport for the greater part of the first day with no real clue what was going to happen. Then spent the next several days trapped on the island with no real options, overpriced hotel rooms, and no desire to relax and enjoy the vacation while the rest of the mainland was possibly going to pot. Whoa. Hawaiians are supposed to be known for their hospitality, but it was the Canadians who really came through, taking stranded and diverted travelers into their homes. I think I may have posted this elsewhere, but 9/11 is my twin little brother's birthday. They were turning 7 when the attack happened. My dad ended up getting stranded on a business trip several states away, so there was no way he was going to make it home that day. When we all got home from school, my mom unplugged every TV in the house, and we sat down and had dinner and cake like everything was fine. They were old enough to know something very bad had happened, but young enough to not understand why, so my mom, sister, and I did everything we could to take their mind off of it. To this day 9/11 is not a somber date for us. The twins claimed it first, and nothing is going to take us away from celebrating the joy of having them in our lives. That seems like a very healthy attitude for all of you. It was my mother's first week back at work after maternity leave, but my sister had died 10 days after birth, so mom's maternity leave became bereavement. I was 5 and didn't remember the dates being so close together, but years later my mother told me she was convinced it was the end of the world. She couldn't fathom what horrible thing would happen next after losing a child and seeing the second plane hit on TV. I was in college. There was a radio in the bathroom, and when I went in to get ready, I heard about it. I initially thought it was a really tasteless shock jock skit. I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania, and the biggest event of the year is the fair. The attacks happened opening day of the fair. It went on and people were still down there trying to find some joy, but it was just silent except for TVs and radios tuned into the news. The carnies weren't even yelling at people as they walked by. You know it's a bad day when the carnies aren't yelling. I worked at a theater as a house manager on that day. The theater catered to the retired set. It was my job that everyone had a nice experience. I would talk to the folks on the buses before they came in, mingle with them before the show and at intermission, and so on. They would come in on bus tours. This particular show celebrated the World War II era, so there was a mix of patriotic music, big band, that kind of thing. This was their era. I had always joked that someday I would be on a bus seeing a musical review about Nirvana and complaining about how loud it is. We had a 3 o'clock and a 7:30 show. This is East Coast USA time, so I was there in the hours after, not in the midst of it. In theater, the show must go on, right? I have several memories from that experience. 1. The folks who were coming to see the shows were the folks who fought World War II. I talked to as many of them as I could. They were devastated. They thought they fought the war that would ultimately keep us safe. This was Pearl Harbor all over again. 2. We did the 3 p.m. show. The performers couldn't get through the patriotic songs. It was too emotional. One woman in particular broke down on stage. They did the best they could. On the spot, they sang God Bless America in unison. It was a beautiful moment. Everyone stood and cried. 3. The performers walked out before the 7:30 show. Understandably, they just couldn't do it. It fell onto me to tell people arriving that it was cancelled. Most understood. Some people were freaking buttholes about it. We had a choir concert scheduled right after the Sandy Hook shooting, a couple of towns away. We had a discussion over whether it would be appropriate to have the performance, and decided to go on based on this Leonard Bernstein quote, "This will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before." I'm on the West Coast, and I got to sleep in that morning, so the whole thing had been over for a couple hours by the time I woke up. I wake up, walk into the living room. My roommate has the TV on. He turns to me and says, "Dude, you gotta sit down." He then says they're both gone. Both towers. I was like, what? He just says they're gone, dude. Terrorists flew planes into them, but the TV was airing footage of the smoking towers still standing, and I pointed that out to him. He said they're just showing footage from earlier. They have both since collapsed. They're gone. I still couldn't believe it until I finally sat down and tuned in. I can't describe the sensation I felt in my chest when the reality of the situation dawned on me. Then I called friends and family. I had a noon class, so I called my university. Surprisingly, a real human answered. and told me all classes were cancelled. I wanted to get a bite before work. My friend picked me up to go eat because he was in shock and wanted out of his pad. We drove around for a while looking for a restaurant that stayed open before we found a sushi bar. It was packed since no one else stayed open and everyone was just watching the TV in the corner. People were making comments about revenge. I can tell they were all in as much shock as me. I worked as a projectionist at an IMAX theater in a museum. My shift started at 2 p.m. My boss told me to not screen any of the movies and just pipe CNN through the digital projector and leave the doors to the theater open. School groups and tourists were just sitting there watching replays of the towers falling on a 70-foot screen in surround sound. Finally, after an hour or so, I was told to just shut down and go home. The rest of the day I just watched footage. Like most of America, I remember going to bed feeling very scared, a fear I had never felt before. My brother's birthday is 9/11. I called him in the afternoon to wish him happy birthday and see how he was doing. His response: "How would you feel knowing your birthday was going to be a national day of mourning for the rest of your life?" My best friend's birthday is the 19th of April. Like all of us, he was super upset about 9/11, but he was at least happy to get his birthday back, because after that no one ever really talks about Oklahoma bombing day anymore. It was a Tuesday morning in the US. I'm guessing not too many parties were going on. I was at work. It was loud and I was trying to hear the radio, but the boss told us to keep working. I thought it was an accident until the second one hit. I was thinking it was a small plane. It wasn't until lunch, when people were talking about it and trying to watch a crappy TV from an antenna, that I actually understood what happened. We were told to just keep working since there was nothing we could do. One guy kept saying there was going to be a nuclear war over this. We had an informal basketball game set for every Tuesday night. I called a friend I would pick up and asked if we should go, and he said, "What else are we going to do?" So we went. It was a short game, but most people showed up. Yep, my dad woke me up for school and just casually said a plane hit the World Trade Center as if it were a freak accident. Also, I lived in a small town and had never seen skyscrapers in real life, so when I heard a plane hit the World Trade Center, I pictured a plane crashing into a big shopping mall. It was a Tuesday, so not exactly a big party day, but my husband and I were both bartenders at the same place at the time. I was first annoyed that we didn't close, but as our regulars came in with just utter shock on their faces, I was really glad that we were open. Most of them were middle-aged single folks who came to our bar every night. They came that night to talk with their friends, comfort each other, and be comforted. It was important that we were there for them. I don't know if this counts, but I worked in a hotel that was attached to a riverboat casino. That afternoon the governor declared that all waterways were to be shut down, so the casino closed. Angry guests came to check out in droves because they couldn't gamble anymore. One woman actually said to me, "I don't see why my day has to be ruined because of something that happened in New York." I came back with a very calm, "Well, they are reporting almost 2,000 people dead already and many more missing. So it seems like it's pretty important. But if you want to be mad because you can't lose $100 in the slot machines, I guess that's your right." My manager thought that was pretty awesome. Awesome line. I wasn't celebrating an event, but I went on a school field trip to watch a play, Shakespeare Abridged. It's a funny play where they smoosh up a lot of Shakespeare in one play. It was surreal. Those actors were true professionals. No underlying feelings could be seen. True meaning of the show must go on. During intermission, one actor came out and said some words about what was happening, and something about the show goes on regardless of what's happening in the world. Then we left and went back to school. We were supposed to go to the mall, but by that time, they were advising staying away from large, crowded areas, so the bus took us back to school, to a large, crowded area. My mother had planned a surprise birthday party for me at our church. She was able to use the event as the reason we were going to said church after school because they were having a prayer service for those affected. I walk in, most of the lights are off, and around the corner to the kitchen dining hall I hear faint music that sounds like a child's toy or something. I think it ended up being a musical birthday candle, but it creeped me out. It was a weird party. Half somber, half yay it's your birthday. Also, my first and last surprise party. My birthday is on the 12th. I was turning 10. I cried that day knowing no one would be coming to my birthday party as my mom, who grew up in NYC, cried about the true tragedy. We rescheduled my birthday celebration, and I learned a lot about perspective. 9/11 fell on my youngest daughter's 10th birthday. A big party was planned and the house was decorated with balloons, streamers, gifts, and cake. All of her friends were invited to celebrate, which was cancelled. The sight of her uncontrollably sobbing at the patio door is one that haunts me still. This comment makes my heart ache in so many ways. My parents' anniversary is 9/11 and my dad worked in the Second World Trade Center tower. Thankfully he was across the street at a conference and was able to catch the last train out of the city as well as call my mom to tell her he was okay. My mom's always been convinced he was so lucky that day because it was their wedding anniversary. 9/11 was the day of my grandfather's funeral. My mom and I were driving to the service when we started hearing reports on the radio. After the burial, my whole family went back to my grandma's and just sat around the living room watching the news coverage. I remember one of my aunts saying, "Well, we will never forget this day for many reasons." Less than a week later, my weirdo, newly reborn uncle, by marriage, killed himself and my 7-year-old cousin and left a note stating 9/11 as one of the justifications for killing his daughter, sending her to heaven now since obviously the world is an awful place and he's sending her to God early. We had a second funeral while the 9/11 coverage was still on a 24-hour cycle. Dang. So sorry man, that must have been very awful. Hope your family is doing okay now. I'm in the UK so the repercussions were obviously very different to what those of you in the USA suffered. My cousin's birthday is the 11th of September. It was an exciting year for him because he had just finished high school. My uncle, his dad, turned off the music and directed us to the news playing on the TV and we saw what was happening. We were all silent for a few minutes, none of us really knowing what to say. The news channel kept going with the story and my cousin just began to cry. Not because it was his birthday but because he's always been very attuned to the pain of others. He said then that he would never celebrate his birthday on the day again. He is now a doctor and true to his word has never celebrated his birthday on 9/11 since, preferring to pay respects. I bet he's a great doctor. On 9/11, my cousin was the head of the Fire and Rescue Services for Loudoun County, VA, which borders Washington, D.C. He was in the command center on the phone with the Pentagon discussing that if the DoD decided, or was ordered, to down a potentially hostile aircraft, where, exactly, in the county should they aim for? What made this discussion surreal, obviously, was that one of the planes had already hit the Pentagon. It was also his daughter's birthday. My uncle lost a lot of friends that night. He printed out a large portrait of the Twin Towers and had his kids play pin the top on the WTC at my cousin's birthday party that evening. My first day at school, ever, was on 9/11. I live in the UK so it didn't really concern any of the adults in terms of us being attacked, but it definitely put a downer on the day. I remember walking in with my mum and seeing these TVs showing the footage of it happening and not understanding what was going, but that's it really. I still have the British newspapers somewhere as well. Can upload pictures at some point if anyone is interested. As an American I would absolutely love to see a paper from 9/11 from a different country's perspective. Not a celebratory event, but I was at a prenatal appointment for my second son. I heard whispers in the office but no one understood what was happening yet. I stopped by the store and the mood was weird. I went home to find my son with tears streaming down his face. He kept saying I thought it was a movie but it's on every channel over and over. We had kids at home and I was 7 months pregnant. We lived just a few hours from the crash site in PA. I was terrified to let him go to work. My daughter had a birthday the same week as 9/11. We decided to go ahead with her party because she was excited about it and too young to understand the significance of what had just happened. She vividly remembers that birthday because there were so many helium balloons. I went to get a couple for her party and was offered a bunch that had been ordered and cancelled because of 9/11. They sold them to me for like a dime a piece, when the usual cost was $2 each. I bought all they had that were appropriate for her age no matter the color. She talks about how that was her favorite birthday party. I was in Manhattan on vacation. Our fun trip turned into a front row seat to a national tragedy. We had an itinerary that we followed closely until that morning when we overslept. We were scheduled to be at the WTC at 11 AM. I went home with PTSD. My dad was supposed to be on flight 175. He took it about once a month for work. A few weeks before 9/11 he quit and his friend took his place. He still suffers from survivor's guilt. Since this is turning more into a where were you when 9/11 happened thread, which is totally fine. I was in 4th grade. It was my turn to run the attendance sheet to the office. The principal of the school was a very friendly and enthusiastic man. As I'm walking by his office I heard him go, "Oh no, oh no, oh crap, they hit it again. We are under attack." Obviously this sent me into a sort of panic, and shortly after they called the 4th grade in to explain what happened and that they'd be shutting down the school for the next 2 days. I remember me and my buddies and our parents all hung out at somebody's house and listening to our parents worry about what was going to happen. It was hard to make sense of everything at that age. I was old enough to understand what happened but not old enough to necessarily understand the implications. Since then I've seen the world grow in a post 9/11 society. This single event was more responsible for shaping world politics than any other event in my lifetime. Obviously, it perpetuated the us versus them, good versus evil mentality that is still so clearly prevalent in almost every facet of our foreign relations. I won't ever forget that day. I was born 9/11 on my mother's birthday. My sweet 16 was 2001. My mom planned for us to go to New York on our birthday. We were going to go watch the sunrise from the Twin Towers, among other things. We had to reschedule it because I had gotten sick days before. I thought I ruined her vacation until it happened. But yeah, we don't really celebrate our birthdays after that. I've met a lot of people born 9/11 and it seems to be about the same. I don't even ask for it off work. My friend had a meeting in the tower the day of 9/11. He was late because he went to get coffee and he went into the building. The elevator didn't work and he didn't want to go up 40 flights of stairs. He left and went back home. He only made it about a block away when the first plane hit and almost instantly killed all of his friends. He ran back home and called all of them, but nothing. They all passed. My parents got married on 9/11, but a year before the actual event happened. When 9/11 happened a year later, everyone was really scared. My parents lived near New York, so it came as a shock to them. But I guess everything turned out alright for them, since they were married for 18 years before separating. Got married several days after. There was a lot of talk. Do we go ahead and have it? Do we postpone? Etc. Ended up going ahead and it turned out for the best. By the end of that week, people were ready to celebrate, be happy and have fun. Of course, several people who were supposed to be there were not because they were stuck in various spots of the country, having been flying and then diverted on Tuesday. Next day we were one of the first flights out since airports were final opening back up. Security was a nightmare, rules were incomprehensible and everything we were made to throw out we could buy at the gate. Armed police escorted people on off the plane. When we arrived to our destination, we met people who had been stuck there for a week. Unplanned. Had to pay an extra week because stuck. Talk about a financial hit. Extra week forced at a fancy 5-star resort. Then, rest of the week, we had a nice outpouring of sympathy for what happened to Americans. It was nice, but odd. Also odd to watch news reports about terrorism and what the US was going to do next from another country or non-US territory. Strange times indeed. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.